What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. It's Thursday, so I'm going to go game by game, talk about all the players I'd be starting and sitting this week. Gonna be a long one. Sit back, hit the like button. Let's get things started off with tonight's game. Broncos at Saints. Very low, I believe lowest total of the week, 37 points. Broncos, 2.5-point road favorites. For the Broncos, not much is appealing. The Saints are a positive matchup for wide receivers and are a better matchup for slot wide receivers than outside wide receivers. I hope Devon Veal gets more run. He's been playing really well when they've let him play, but overall, you look at this team in the short term, Javonte Williams, Courtland Sutton, they're really the only two you can have like any sort of faith in. Sean Payton mentioned wanting to get Estime more touches. He returned from IR last week. He's looked good in his 4 touches this season. He wants to get him more looks, but he also mentioned how he does prefer to use a 2 running back committee as opposed to a 3 running back committee. Thank you, Sean Payton. We do not like 3 running back committees, but we also like Estime. So we'll kind of see how that goes. If they do ever switch to a 3 running back committee, that's bad. If they ever switch to a 2 running back committee and use Estime, that's bad for one of, obviously, McLaughlin or Williams. But yeah, you can't play Estime. I don't really think you can play McLaughlin. I think it really comes down to, do you have to start Williams? Fine. He's an okay play. Not that great. Do you have to play Sutton? Fine, but you're probably going to need a touchdown. Both of them are flex plays, but as we always say in the Thursday game, even if you plan on using them in the flex, use them at their position. So if you're planning on flexing Courtland Sutton, still play him at wide receiver just to give yourself a chance. What if there's a surprise inactive? Someone gets injured on Friday, on Saturday, surprise inactive on Sunday. Just give yourself extra flexibility with that flex spot. For the Saints, Rattler looked pretty solid last week. That didn't come out of nowhere. We talked last week about how, he was a decent prospect. He played really well in the preseason. There was actually a lot of hype about him as a player, and it's not like Derek Carr is that good of a quarterback. So again, didn't come out of nowhere. Unfortunately, even though Denver is missing Pat Surtain this week, so that's going to, of course, help, the Saints are missing Taysom Hill. They're missing Chris Olave. They're missing Rashid Shaheed. Olave concussion, Shaheed just had knee surgery. That's tough, right? If you're a rookie quarterback coming in, even with a full team, playing against Denver is a difficult opponent. Now you're missing, 3 of your top playmakers. Top targets are going to be Kamara, Bub Means, Mason Tipton, Cedric Wilson, and Juwan Johnson. So that's not great. I don't care how good of a quarterback you are. That's not great. Kamara, must play. Bub Means, Mason Tipton, fine. They're going to grade out around the wide receiver. When I'm finished, I'm assuming they'll be in the 45 to 55 range. Right now, I think they're 51 and 53, but they're going to be in that general bucket of the wide receiver, 45 to 55. Either one could have a good game. You're probably going to need a touchdown because I don't think either one of them is going out there and having 8 for 80, something like that. So you're going to need a score. Both of them could very easily have 2 receptions for 20 yards. My preference would be, if you had Olave, you had Shaheed, would be to just try and find something else. I don't think you have to get their direct backup, but if you needed to go to this spot, you wanted to play one of these two, I think my slight lean is Bub Means, just for the athleticism, the chance of hitting on a big play. But again, neither one of them is going to project amazingly. Sunday games kickoff in London again. So remember, 9:30 Eastern kickoff. Set your lineups for that game. This week it'll be Patriots at Jaguars. Jaguars playing their second game in a row in London. Total set at 42.5. Jaguars 5.5-point favorites. For the Patriots side, Drake May had an MRI on Wednesday. Haven't heard anything really about that. It seems like he's fine, but just confirm, obviously, before the game that he's good to go. He looked shaky at times last week, but he still put together the best passing day for the Patriots this season, 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, adds 38 rushing yards on that as well. He is a viable streaming option this week, especially against a very pathetic Jaguars defense. They rank last in EPA per pass allowed, 4th worst in yards per pass attempt. They've given up the most passing yards per game, 2nd most touchdowns overall. It is not a good Jaguars defense. Drake May right now is my quarterback 15, so not a quarterback 1. Still a rookie quarterback in a second start on the Patriots, so he could absolutely fall apart, throw for 190 yards, 1 touchdown, and run for 25, and you're like, oh, that wasn't that great. But because he has the mobility, that helps the floor, right? If he's going to get you 2-3 points on the ground, that's going to help, even not scoring. I think that the Patriots are pretty likely to score some touchdowns in this game. Not a lot, but pretty likely to score. And so he's probably not going to have 0 touchdowns. And again, he is a decent quarterback. Like, I think he's actually a pretty good prospect. And so I think he's a quality streaming option, not one I expect to score 30, but one that I think can put up a decent score. For the running backs, if Stevenson misses again, then Gibson's like a fine running back too, more volume-based play, and a better matchup, of course, this week than last week. And then if Stevenson does play, just start Stevenson as the running back 2. Whichever one is starting is a running back 2 this week. After then, Demario Douglas is my wide receiver 37, Hunter Henry, tight end 13. We've been avoiding New England for most of the season, but again, we said we'd be attacking them at some point when Drake May starts. We won't do it every week, but because it's also a great matchup here, I think you can lean on these players. On the Jaguars side, more of a neutral matchup overall, but the running backs do have a strongest matchup on the team. If Etienne is out, which I think is what will happen, but confirm that. If he's out, Tank Bigsby is a high-end running back too. Ernest Johnson would be like a low-end flex play. The game script is expected to be positive here. We never know, right? 5.5 point spread doesn't mean it's guaranteed that for the whole game the Jaguars are winning. But if it plays out as expected and Jacksonville jumps out to a lead and tries to sit on that lead at some point, we should expect Tank Bigsby to get a decent amount of run in a positive matchup for him. And we're assuming they jumped out to a lead, they scored points, he could have been the player scoring touchdowns. So he's a very strong play. If they do get behind, if he does fumble the ball, again, maybe they do go to Ernest Johnson a little bit more. And I think if they did fall behind by like a score or two, they would actually lean on to Ernest Johnson. But again, the expectation is Bigsby's a better play. After them, Evan Ingram must start, had 10 receptions last week. He was featured in this offense. Have to start him. Brian Thomas Jr. is like a high-end flex play. You could play him at wide receiver too as well. I don't know. I'm curious to see, honestly, if Jacksonville gets up, how pass-heavy do they lean? Because in most games, they've been leaning pretty pass-heavy. But also, who does Christian Gonzalez shadow? Does he shadow Christian Kirk? Does he shadow Brian Thomas Jr.? My gut says he's going to shadow Brian Thomas Jr., which would lead to a little bit more targets for Christian Kirk. Last week, he kind of split. I was excited to see if he would stay on Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs. If you just like kind of watch through that game, it depended on the play, but he was kind of rotating between the two of them. So maybe he does the same, but I think they view Brian Thomas Jr. as more of the threat. So I would probably assume he would be on them. Regardless, again, I think you can play both of them in the flex. It's not like the Patriots have like a shutdown defense. They're easier to attack on the ground. And again, if Jacksonville gets up, it's more likely that they run the ball more. But Brian Thomas Jr. can hit deep. Christian Kirk can rack up 6-7 receptions. Again, both kind of flex plays, with Brian Thomas Jr. being a better flex play with a better ceiling. 1 o'clock games kick off with Titans at Bills. 41-point total. Bills 9.5-point home favorites. For the Titans side, Spears expected to miss this week, potentially even more. So Pollard should operate as a close to featured running back. They'll mix in other running backs there, but if they were already using Pollard a decent amount over Spears, you have to think these backups are scrubs. Like, they're going with Tony Pollard as a close to featured back. Only positive matchup on the team as well. We just saw the Jets run all over this Bills defense. They were doing absolutely nothing entering last week. And to be fair, they changed play callers, right? And they also just like ran better plays, used motion more, like things that everyone knows you should be doing. They finally did. And so they then looked better. So it wasn't all the matchup, but this Jets run game was doing nothing. Then they played the Bills last week and they did a lot more. So it's a good spot. You'd imagine they lean on him. I would definitely play Pollard as a running back 1. Behind him, you're probably benching all Titans players. I feel very confident that the Titans are going to do their best to get some layup routes to Calvin Ridley early in this game. I feel pretty confident that he's going to get a lot of looks, that they're just going to get him receptions early on. Plus, it's pretty likely, it's a 9.5-point spread, right? Pretty likely that Titans are going to have to lean pass heavy at some point. So I think Ridley's absolutely flex viable in my eyes. The reason we want him long-term, though, is not this week, right? This week, another negative matchup. He's had 5 negative matchups over the first 6 weeks, but over the final 10 weeks, 9 positive matchups in the final 10. So great moving forward. Then for the Bills side, all comes down to who's playing, honestly. My guess is that both James Cook and Amari Cooper will play, but that maybe like Cooper is a little bit more limited because he's joined the team just this week. He obviously can't know all of the plays. And then James Cook coming off an injury with Ray Davis playing phenomenally. You'd think maybe he wouldn't have the workload he's been expecting to have, he's been having thus far this season. So I think they're both going to play, but you kind of have to just see what the reports are, later today, on Friday, on Saturday. If they both play, or I guess if Cook plays, because it's kind of different. Okay, if Cook plays, I probably start him. I think he would be involved enough, and if they're playing him, like they're not going to rush him back. So if they're playing him, you should assume he's good to go. I don't think he has the touches he's had before, but he's an explosive player. They are massive favorites. Even if the matchup isn't amazing, I think the touch volume expectation would be enough to where it's like, just play James Cook if he plays. And I would probably bench Ray Davis if that happens. But if you've got some buys, you've got some injuries, and you're like, I don't really have anyone at running back 2. Can I get a few points from Ray Davis? I think he played well enough last week where at worst, he's going to get some opportunities. And let's be honest, he's probably who they're going to go to at this point at the goal line anyway. So if they're going to score a lot of points and score some touchdowns, he's got a decent chance of scoring. So you could play him as a low end too, but he will not project as like a top 30 running back. I don't think he will. He'd be somewhere in the 30s. But if Cook is out, I would definitely play Ray Davis this week. If Amari plays, I'll want to hear some report about his usage because it's not a guarantee he'd be out there even like 70% of the snaps. This is also a very bad matchup. The Titans are the second worst matchup for fantasy wide receivers. So not a spot we're looking to attack if Amari is not going to have full snap share. So we'll see what the reports say. I'll adjust the rankings once we get more of a concrete take there. But I really just wouldn't play any of the wide receivers. Maybe you could look on Shakir if Cooper is out. But aside from that, I wouldn't play them. And again, I'd only play Cooper if it seemed like he was going to play most of the snaps. If that is the case, I'd probably throw him in there to flex because there's obviously a decent amount of upside playing with Josh Allen. After them, I would start Josh Allen. I don't think you can ever really bench him. And then Kincaid's my tight end 12 right now. Really depends on what else you have. There are a few tight ends that I do rank higher than him that you may have been able to pick up off free agency, but I don't know your team. Tight end 12, just kind of see who else you have. If Cooper's playing, he's a worse play than normal. Next up, we have probably the best game of the week, Lions at Vikings, 15.5 point total, Vikings 1.5 point home favorites. For the Lions, Goff is my quarterback 14, Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 3, J-Mo, wide receiver 21, Gibbs, running back 19, Monty, running back 29, and then Laporta, tight end 6. Everyone I listed is 100% viable to start. I think in any matchup, in any week, you can start all those guys on this team, understanding that they're not going to drop 50 every week and that one or two of those players are going to post a relative dud, or at least a dud, understanding what we usually expect from this team, just because there are so many good players and they can't all go off. The Vikings do have one of the strongest defenses in the league, but Brett Kallman posted something pretty interesting this week, just looking at, Brian Flores loves the blitz, right? His defenses are really good, and this Vikings defense is really good because they're very creative with the blitzing, right? Teams just can't figure it out. Even some quarterbacks who've been in the league for a very long time, they get confused against Flores defenses because you don't know who's coming in the blitz. They blitz a ton, so you know someone is coming, but you just never really know who, and that's very confusing for defenses, and especially for young, or confusing for quarterbacks, and especially young quarterbacks. But if we look at the last 2 games that Flores has matched up with Jared Goff, Goff has been blitzed on 57 of 77 dropbacks. And if you look at those dropbacks, over 500 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 8.9 yards per attempt, really strong numbers. And if you look at the last 3 weeks for Jared Goff, he's averaging 21.1 yards per pass attempt against the blitz. So we will see. Given what's happened against Flores, given what he's been doing recently, you would think they wouldn't blitz because he's been so amazing against it. But if they drop back, do they have, a strong enough defense to stop this attack, right? Because the Lions are one of the best offenses in the NFL. Maybe they feel that they need to apply some level of pressure because they have a great offensive line. If there's no pressure on Jared Goff, then he's probably going to pick them apart. So it'll be very interesting to see this game. Again, regardless, I think you just start Lions players. You kind of just know that every week. Yeah, some of them might have a lower floor. this week, they're underdogs, right? They're road underdogs against a team coming off bye who has a strong defense. And so they could struggle. They could only score 2 touchdowns. And if you've got like 6 strong players and there's only 2 touchdowns to go around, like there's going to be a lot of duds out there. But again, I think you kind of just have to play all of these guys every week. Then for the Vikings, they're coming off bye. They're at home. They got a Lions defense that looked great last week. Of course, Dallas just looked terrible on defense, but they're definitely susceptible to giving up big games. And they lost Hutchinson for the season. That's going to be huge, right? Losing him, losing that pass rush. Like they still have an okay pass rush, but like he was dominant. He was having a phenomenal season. Losing him is just going to give a little bit more time to this Vikings passing attack. We talked about last week how when you play the Lions, you can't really run the ball. And again, maybe that changes a little bit moving forward without Hutchinson, but it's still likely that they're going to be a strong run defense. And so you're much better off throwing the ball against them. I think all of Darnold, Jefferson, Addison just have to be in your starting lineup. They're great plays. We just have to assume that the Vikings are going to have a decent game here. All those guys have significant upside. Aaron Jones, if he plays, I think is a must start. I don't think they'll roll him out there if he's not. Like he won't be 100%, but he's not like good enough to go. If Aaron Jones does not play, I think you can play Ty Chandler not as a must start, but as some sort of like low end running back too. Next up, we've got Eagles at Giants. 43-point total. Eagles 3-point road favorites. For the Eagles, the Giants are a negative matchup. It's also a road divisional game, so things could get a little bit weird. It could be closer scoring than people think. I think, honestly, the 3-point spread is already closer than people think. But this could be a very close game. It could be a low-scoring game. It could be a very gross game. But it doesn't really matter for Philly. You have to start Hurts, Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith every week. Right now, Dallas Goedert is my tight end 9, so it depends on who you have, but you're probably starting him as well. Then for the Giants, all depends on injuries. I really don't know who's going to play this week. Latest reports are, right before I recorded this, it seems like Neighbors is going to play. He has one more step to pass. He's got to see the neurologist. We'll see if he can pass that, but it's seeming very likely he's going to play, so that's good. Singletary, more hesitant. I really just don't know what's going to happen there. If Neighbors does return, obviously start him every week. Then Wandale would be like a lower end flex play. Slayton is kind of like a hope for a touchdown, hope for a long play, really touchdown or bust low end flex play. If Neighbors does end up being out, I think you're playing Wandale. I think Slayton's good in the flex, but again, I think Neighbors is going to play this week. At running back, again, who knows? I really don't know. Not only is Singletary going to play, but if he plays, what's the split going to be? Because Tyron Tracy Jr. at this point is pretty clearly better than Singletary, a great fit in this offense. But until we get some sort of report about if Singletary is playing and if he's playing, what the split's going to look like, we don't really know. If Singletary is out, keep Tracy in the starting lineup or Tracy Jr. in the starting lineup. Just play him as your running back too. The defense isn't terrible for the Eagles, but they are below average. They don't create a ton of pressure, and they do have an offense that can put up points. And so that combination makes them a positive matchup for running backs, for wide receivers. So again, I'd play Tracy Jr. if Singletary is out, and if Singletary is playing, I'll update the projections, just kind of seeing what beat reporters are saying they expect the split to be. Next up, we've got Bengals at Browns, 41.5-point total. Bengals 5.5-point road favorites. For the Bengals, we're starting to see the snaps and the touches trend towards Chase Brown. Brown has been by far the better running back this season, by far more efficient, but it's taken the Bengals a long time to kind of shift more workload to him. Last week was the first time in Brown's career he played over 40% of the snaps. He gained 64 yards and a touchdown on 13 opportunities. A lot of that was because Moss fumbled in the third quarter, didn't really see the field much after that. I'm expecting them to go a little bit more back to Moss. Like they kind of benched him because of the fumble. Chase Brown fumbled and could have lost them the game on that fumble on that last drive. Then he scores a touchdown, so kind of makes up for it. But again, the fumble wasn't great there. So they both fumbled. Right now, I have Brown as my running back 23, Moss as my running back 28. I don't feel super confident, honestly, in those rankings. I view both of them as lower end flex plays. Either one of them could absolutely bust. But I think if you had to play one of them, I would prefer Brown, but I think both are fine just to get you a couple points this week. Then for the other positions after running back, pretty straightforward. I mean, start Burrow, Chase, Higgins every week, bench everyone else. I don't think you really have to play the tight ends right now. Then for the Browns, they traded away Amari Cooper. The Bengals are 9th worst in pass defense, 5th worst in run defense. They've allowed the 5th most touchdowns. So you would think, right? You lose Cooper, bad defense. You'd think that this is a spot where we get a lot of usable players, right? Unfortunately, Watson's still the quarterback, and so maybe you can use Judy as a low-end flex play. You're definitely starting David Njoku. We were kind of starting him anyways. But other than that, I don't feel great about anyone. Jerome Ford's going to miss this game with a hamstring injury. Chubb is making his return, but I have a hard time believing Chubb's going to get a lot of touches in his first game back. So I would probably keep him on the bench. Again, you can't play Ford. Foreman's your other option. Kind of tough to trust him in a split when we're also not expecting the Browns to be winning. So I'll read the reports. I'll adjust the rankings accordingly. Right now, Judy, Njoku, really the only two I'd want. Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman. If you're in a deep league, a 14 or 16 team league, you have to play one of them. Not terrible, but 8, 10, 12 team leagues, we're probably not in the range where we have to play those two. Another great game. Up next, we've got Texans at Packers, 47.5 point total. Packers, 2.5 point home favorites. For the Texans, still no Nico for a few more weeks. And so all of Mixon, Diggs, Dell are must starts in my eyes. The Packers are a tough matchup for wide receivers, but Diggs, Dell, they're going to have large enough roles with Nico out that I think you kind of have to just play them. I never like using Dalton Schultz. He could very easily bust. He's not that great, but he does have the best matchup on the team, and his targets are obviously going to go up without Nico. He's a viable streaming option this week. Right now, my tight end 13, tied for my tight end 13 with a player we'll talk about in a second. And then Stroud, honestly, he doesn't project well this great because a lot of this offense flows through Nico being hyperly efficient, and that's just gone. But I would roll with him. The Packers side, they're pretty likely to score points. It's pretty likely that we're going to need to see the Texans be aggressive, and Stroud's good enough to have 303 touchdowns, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in really any spot. Then for the Packers, Love and Reed, their must starts. Check the reports on Reed's ankle. He's been a little bit limited with that ankle injury, but I think he's going to be fine to go. Jacobs, very solid start as a running back too. The two you're really looking at are Dobbs and Watson as like flex plays. I'm projecting Wicks out right now. If that holds, I do think Dobbs and Watson are good plays. The matchup is fine. We know Green Bay is going to score, so honestly, it's pretty likely one of the two is going to find the end zone. I don't think either one of them are must plays. I think they're really good in the flex just because we know that they're going to use the running backs a lot. They're going to, sprinkle a little bit into the tight ends, that Reed's going to get the hyperly efficient looks, and that Dobbs and Watson are going to get like secondary looks, not as many design plays, and they just have a much lower floor if the Packers only score 3 touchdowns and they don't move the ball, super fast, super aggressively down the field. We could easily see, Christian Watson have 2 for 40 and Dobbs have 3 for 40, and you're like, that wasn't that great of a play. Behind them, as I said before, Schultz was tied for 13th. He's tied with Tucker Kraft. So Kraft came back to earth last week, tied in 13 right now. He, unlike Schultz, so Schultz has the best matchup among the Houston players. Kraft has the worst matchup among the Packers players. I'm not expecting a big game, but hey, tight end 13, totally fine to stream that. Next up, we've got Seahawks at Falcons, very high. 51 point total, definitely higher than I think a lot of people were thinking. And then Falcons, 3 point home favorites. For the Seahawks, this game has an extremely high total. It's being played in a dome. The Falcons have a below average or neutral to below average defense overall. Ken Walker, DK Metcalf, I think they're both must starts. JSN, my wide receiver 35, Lockett, wide receiver 43. I do think the Seahawks are going to have a good game this weekend. So as a tiebreaker, I think I'd want all these guys in my starting lineup. Like if it's very close between Lockett and someone else, play Lockett. If it's really close between JSN and someone else, play JSN. Like I think this is going to be a pretty good game. I think there's going to be points to go around. I don't think that Seattle's going to get up big and be able to just sit on a lead and run the ball every play. So I think I'd want these pass catchers in my lineup. But again, if you've got like 3 top 20 wide receivers and you're like, oh, should I throw JSN in there? It's like, well, no, he still is, in the mid 30s for me. The exception to like kind of spot starts would probably be Charbonnet and Fant. They're just not seeing enough consistent volume to really be worth starting. If your tight end is terrible or on bye and you have to play Fant, sure, but I don't think Charbonnet and Fant are very good plays. Geno is also a great streaming option, though. In the initial projections, he's the quarterback 8 right now. Then for the Falcons, they did a great game last week, but that was against the Panthers, right? Everyone is a good game against the Panthers. Bijan, London, their must starts. Mooney is projecting as a pretty strong start in the flex this week. He's averaging 13.24 expected points per game this season, which is slightly higher than I'm projecting him for in full PPR this weekend, but it's not that far off. London, obviously a much better play, but if you had Mooney, you had to play him in the flex this weekend. I am definitely fine doing that. Again, this is a game with a 51-point total. The Falcons are favorites. That's not going to happen very many times this season. Pitts coming in as my tight end 7. Seattle's the second best matchup for opposing tight ends, so a good spot for Kyle Pitts. Kirk Cousins, good streaming option, my quarterback 10 right now. Again, great game. If you've got a tiebreaker and it's a player on Seattle, a player on the Falcons, I would just play the player in this game. And then finally, Algier, running back 33. He's probably one of the worst plays on the team, but you know, if you've got buys, you've got injuries, you have to play him. He'd be fine. If they do get up, they do score, there's a chance he scores a touchdown. There's a chance they're kind of using him late in the game, so he'd be fine to play. Next up, we've got Dolphins at Colts, 43.5-point total. Colts 3-point home favorites. For the Dolphins, they'll be without Tua for at least one more week. Seems like Huntley's going to draw the start, but see who plays. If it's Skylar Thompson, we're not going to like these players as much, but I think Huntley is going to play or start the quarterback there. Colts, super positive matchup, but to be fair, it's more because they allow their opponents to run a million plays and they apply the second least pressure to quarterbacks in the league. On a per play basis, their run defense, their pass defense, it's not that bad, but when you're allowing the second most plays, when you're allowing, or generating no pressure on the quarterback, that hurts, right? Achane definitely seems like he's going to return this week, so he should be good to go. You're definitely starting him. Him and Tyreek Hill, I would say, are must starts. I understand that, both have not been great without Tua, but it's like either one of them could score an 80-yard touchdown on any play, and both of them are going to be the focus of this team. They went into the bye week being like, okay, we got to try and get a win here, right? Like we need to win without Tua. We're hoping that Tua can come back. We think Tua is going to come back, but they have to get some wins to make the playoffs. And so they're going to be, they're one of the offenses that we love because they design plays for their best players. You know that there are going to be some plays out there this week that are specifically designed for Achane, Tyreek Hill, and then a few out there designed for Jalen Waddle as well. And if they hit on those plays, you're going to really want them in your starting lineup. So I think you're playing them. Mostert, low-end flex play. Waddle, more of a boom-bust flex play. Again, all of those 4 can hit for an 80-yard touchdown on any play. So you don't have to start them all, but if it's close, you probably want to be starting players with that in the range of outcomes. But again, Achane, Hill should definitely be started. Just understand, that, they're only projected to score 20 points, 20.25 points. Even coming off by, that's not amazing, but start Achane Hill. For the Colts, looks like AR is going to start this week. Of course, confirm that and definitely check on Sunday. We thought he might be starting last week, and then he did not. I have to play him in my Dynasty League. I have Dak on bye, so I don't have an option. So I'm sure he's going to leave after like 5 plays. But if you had to play him, he's still projecting as my quarterback 10 right now, and that's even adding on like a lot more risk that he does leave early with injury. If I gave him, a full share, he'd probably be like a top 7 quarterback this week. But injuries, though, is the name of the game for the Colts. So he's dealing with the injury. Trey Sermon dealing with the knee injury. Pittman playing through this back injury. JT trying to return from the ankle injury. So honestly, who knows who's going to be playing this weekend. I'm a little bit excited about Tyler Goodson if he does draw the start. So if you get Sermon out, you get JT out. Tyler Goodson has looked explosive in his career. I think he would have a pretty solid game if those guys were out, but you would need both of them out to play him. But honestly, I'd be pretty excited to play him if that happened. My guess right now is that JT returns next week. I've watched a few interviews he's done. He's definitely returning soon. He's close to returning. He's trending in the right direction. I Again, my guess right now is that he's not going to play this week. Overall, as things stands right now, AR's quarterback 10, Goodson is running back 16, again, because I'm assuming that JT is out and Trey Sermon's out. Downs, wide receiver 18, and then Pittman's sort of like a risky flex play, one that I'd be okay making, but understanding that he is playing through a pretty big injury, so you could leave at any point, and he could be less effective as well. Alec Pierce could always hit if AR starts. We know that AR is perfectly willing to chuck the ball 80 yards downfield. That's good for Pierce. And then AD Mitchell has honestly been like 100 times better than the Bucs score indicates, but both are pretty low likelihood plays. And so if you are in an 8, 10, or 12 team league, you probably do have better options. 14, 16 is where I'd more look towards them. 4 o'clock games kick off with Raiders at Rams, 43.5 point total. Rams 6.5 point home favorites. For the Raiders, they traded away Devonta Adams. They have Jacoby Myers dealing with this ankle injury. Bowers is a must play. Myers is a must play if he starts, and a great play if he does start. Beyond those two, Trey Tucker is like a low-end flex play if Myers is out. The running backs are kind of dependent on Zamir White's status. I don't have a final report on that, so check that tonight. Check that on Friday and Saturday. If Zamir White returns, him and Madison are very low-end plays, probably ones I would rather bench. If he does not return this week, Madison is fine as a low-end running back too, more ideally in the flex or in that second flex spot. But the Rams have bad defense, right? Second worst EPA per pass allowed, have allowed the most passing yards per play, the most rushing yards per game. So if there was a spot for this Raiders offense to get going, this is it. To be determined if they will actually take advantage of that, though. Then for the Rams, crossing my fingers, seems like Cooper Kupp can return this week. If he does play, obviously play him. And then Tutu, Demarcus Robinson, Jordan Whittington, they'd all be pretty low-end plays. If Kupp is going to miss one more game and return next week, Tutu and Witt become flex viable. Parkinson moves up to more of like a low-end tight end 1. I just think if Kupp does return, all of this offense is going to flow through him, Kyren, a little bit to Corum, and you'll get the occasional dump off to Parkinson, the occasional design look to Tutu or Whittington, but most of these guys would be secondary plays. It would be Kupp, it would be Kyren as smash plays, get in your starting lineup. Other than those two, no one would stand out as a great play. Stafford, fine to stream as a very low-end play, but you'd need Kupp back. We're more waiting for Puka. Once they have Kupp and Puka back and they're not playing, or they're playing a team that will push them, they're not playing a terrible team, we'll be looking to stream Stafford. Right now, I don't think the Raiders really push the Rams, so it's like I don't think Stafford goes out there and continually has to push the ball downfield, gets up to like 350 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. It just doesn't feel like a likely outcome for him this week. Panthers at Commanders is up next, 51.5 point total. Commanders 8 point home favorites. For the Panthers, Jonathan Brooks practicing. Not going to return this week, but positive. Chuba, going to make another start. He's an elite play. Should be in your starting lineups for sure. Commanders are the number 2 fantasy matchup for wide receivers. And so Deontay Johnson is an auto start as a wide receiver 1. Leggett, honestly, is flex viable. He's athletic enough to get behind this Commanders defense. And so there are definitely worse plays you can make. I don't think he's a must play, but if you had to use Leggett in your flex, totally fine doing that. Probably wouldn't look to anyone else, but keep an eye on Jalen Coker in deeper formats. I'll keep an eye on him for 12-team leagues, but 12, 14, 16-team leagues, just keep an eye on it. Mingo stinks, right? And I think there's a world where they bench him for Coker at some point. I think he's actually maybe a decent prospect, and so just keep an eye on that situation. Then for the Commanders, Jane Daniels must start every week. So is Brian Robinson Jr., especially this week. He was back at practice on Wednesday. I think he's going to give it a go this week. I think he's going to play. Panthers are by far the best fantasy matchup for opposing running backs. They cannot stop the run. They give up 1 million rushing touchdowns. So Brian Robinson Jr. must start. Austin Eckler, honestly, viable as a low-end running back too, or in the flex spot. Behind them, I think I'm just going to keep rolling with McLaurin every week. I've just been playing him every week. He does well. The expected fantasy points aren't amazing, but the efficiency is there. He's being looked at in the red zone heavily. I think until he proves us wrong, just keep playing McLaurin every week. And then Ertz, continues to be a viable streaming option. We know that he has no ceiling, but he's got 97% of the Commanders' expected tight end fantasy points over the last month, and he's 11th among all tight ends in expected points per game over that time. Again, not going to go out there and have 10 for 100, but what tight end is going to? He's going to get you some points, and that's better than a lot of tight ends. I'd also keep an eye on Noah Brown. Like, he's been productive in the past, and it seems like now he's the clear number 2 wide receiver. He's not going to project well because, again, they're going to run a ton this week. Like, they are going to go so run heavy. They're going to run for touchdowns. I just don't think the passing attack behind McLaurin is going to do all that much this week, but a name to keep in mind for future weeks. Final 4 o'clock game is going to be Chiefs at 49ers, 47-point total, 49ers, 1.5-point home favorites. For the Chiefs, coming off bye, so I would expect a really strong game plan this week. Unfortunately, their offense has just been decimated by injuries, and so they've got very few must plays left on this team. Kelsey is a must play. Kareem Hunt right now is my running back 21. Worthy, Juju, they're viable in the flex. We always want to be targeting rookie wide receivers coming off bye, especially as these bye weeks push into the second half of the rookie season. I don't think it's a lock that Worthy's going to go off. We talked about this last week with Ladd McConkey being like, he's playing really well. The role is increasing coming off bye. And then he had a good game. He commanded 8 targets. And again, the underlying metrics are strong, but it's just not a guarantee that anyone's going to go off in any game. And so I think Worthy is set up nicely here, but we will see if he ends up hitting. Again, flex play for him and Juju. And then Mahomes, he's projecting as a high-end quarterback 2. It completely depends on who else you have. I have him in one league. I will be starting him this week. Then for the 49ers, the Chiefs are the worst fantasy matchup for opposing running backs. They're a negative matchup for quarterbacks and wide receivers, and a slightly positive one for tight ends. We will see if Jordan Mason's able to play this week, but again, this is an awful spot. Mason only projects him at running back 27 if he starts, and Guerrero would probably come in at the running back 40, 45 if he drew the start. Either would need to have a touchdown to save their day, but again, not a spot we are expecting to see a lot of running back production from. The Chiefs have faced the Ravens, Bengals, Falcons, Chargers, and Saints, and Derrick Henry is the only running back with more than 34 rushing yards against them, and even he only had 46 and a score. Remember that opening game where we were like, oh man, maybe Derrick Henry's not going to be good this season, or some people, I guess, were saying that. No, it's just that the Chiefs have an unbelievable run defense and no running back. I listed off some teams with pretty good running backs. Baltimore, Cincy, Atlanta, the Chargers, and the Saints. There are good running backs on this team, and those are some good rushing offenses. One running back, over 34 rushing yards. So not a good spot against Kansas City. San Fran's going to have to lean on their passing attack this week, so I would start all of Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, and Purdy. Sunday night game is going to be Jets at Steelers. Very low, 38-point total. Jets are 2-point road favorites. For the Jets, they looked a lot better last week. They now have Adams, and so I would expect pretty greatly increased efficiency overall. Of course, it might take Adams a few weeks to get going, but let's be honest. He's played years with Aaron Rodgers. He could exit the huddle. Rodgers could just be like, yo, run a post, run this. They know what they're doing. This is not a random wide receiver changing teams mid-season. This is Adams reuniting with Aaron Rodgers. I would not be concerned about any sort of drop-off in play. Maybe one game. But honestly, I don't think that's even going to happen. So I would play him. I would play Garrett Wilson. The matchup is brutal. It's on the road. The Steelers are very strong defense, but we saw improved play calling last week. You combine that with Adams taking pressure away from Garrett Wilson. If Garrett Wilson was walking into the spot against the Steelers, he'd be the primary focus of the Steelers. He would have the worst cornerback coverage. It'd be really, really difficult cornerback coverage because Steelers have great cornerback play. Everything we focused on him, he'd probably have 12 targets. He'd probably catch 6 of them, and we'd hope for a touchdown, right? The volume goes down. He's probably not going to have double-digit targets this week. But with Adams taking primary cornerback coverage, with Adams seeing double team, he can win those on his own. And then you have Garrett Wilson in single coverage with less safety help. Well, his efficiency is going up as well. So everything's just going to kind of help for this offense. Again, long term, I don't think anyone knows exactly how valuable both of these running backs or both these wide receivers are going to be this season. I'm trying my best to project that in the rest of the season rankings. I think we're just going to need to see it play out for a week. For this week, though, Adams is going to play. I believe that's already been reported. I'm playing both of them. If you have these guys, get them in your starting lineup. Again, not a good spot. But man, are we going to be like really happy if we see them go out there and look good against the Steelers at Pittsburgh? This is a test, right? This is a test for us. First week with Adams. If they look half decent on offense, we're going to be jamming these guys into starting lineups every week. But again, we will see. But I think you're starting those two. I think you're starting Breece Hall. He looked great last week. I mean, he's a great running back, obviously. Just the usage was a little bit weird for a time there, but finally better play calling. So definitely start him. I think we're going to stream Aaron Rodgers at points this season, but maybe not this week. Like, it is still a very difficult matchup. I probably would not stream Aaron Rodgers, but in future games where they get worse defenses, we're going to be streaming him at times. Then for the Steelers, looks like Russ is going to start, which I think over time is a plus for all their skill players, but they're facing the Jets. This is the one team where it's like, man, just don't play any wide receivers unless like Justin Jefferson against them. So I don't think you're starting Pickens or any of their other pass catchers. I don't think you're starting Pat Freiermuth, but I think he projects as like the tight end 16, 17, that general range, but I don't think start him. Najee's like the running back 20, Warren running back 34, but if you wanted to just completely fade the Pittsburgh offense this week, I'd be fine doing that. If you had to play someone though, I would play Najee. He'd really be the only one I'd expect to have an okay game. The first of two Monday night games is going to be Ravens at Bucs, 49.5 point total. Ravens 3.5 point road favorites. For the Ravens, the Bucs are a neutral to slightly positive matchup. Plus, the Ravens have the third highest team total of the week, and they're a very good offense. All of Lamar, Henry, Flowers should be in starting lineups, with Likely and Andrews being viable streaming options. You can basically take that, copy and paste it every single week. You are starting Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Zay Flowers most weeks. Again, the only hesitation with Flowers at times is when they get up big, when they get up by multiple scores. They are perfectly fine running it every single play. And so you see really reduced volume for the pass catchers. But in most normal game scripts, we're just starting those three, and then Likely and Andrews viable to stream, but are just not going to project as top 10 tight ends each week. Then for the Bucs, the Ravens are actually like a better matchup than you would think. They historically have a very, very strong defense, but they rank 6th worst in EPA per pass allowed. Only the Jaguars have allowed more passing yards per game. So Baker, Evans, Godwin, they are must starts this week. Cade Otton is a solid streaming option. He's my tight end 10 right now. He actually has the best matchup of all offensive players. For running back, it really depends on Rachaad White's status. And then after that, it depends on what the heck are they going to do. Hopefully we get some reports. I will just adjust the rankings accordingly there. I don't see how you bench Sean Tucker after last week's game. Like, he's so explosive. He's clearly a good running back, clearly a great fit for this team. I think you could easily play Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving and not even play Rachaad White. I think you have enough running back production through those two where you don't even need White. So I have to think they're probably looking for trades there. But if White returns this week, they're not going to have traded him by then, I don't think. So do we see a 3 running back committee? Do they stick with 2? And what 2 do they stick with? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. So hopefully we can get an answer by Sunday. Again, I will watch the reports. I will change the projections, update those. I don't know what's going to happen. I truly don't know how we rank these guys, but I find it hard to believe if you still have Rachaad White. You've been saying trade him away forever here. I don't see how you play him. Like, I don't see how they go back to being like, yep, Rachaad White, go out there and give us 3 yards of carry. Like, sure, he's good in the receiving game, but he can't do anything on the ground. And these two have shown they're great on the ground. I don't know. I don't see how you play White, but again, we'll see what the reports say. Final game of the week is going to be Chargers at Cardinals, 43.5 point total. Chargers, 2.5 point road favorites. For the Chargers, Dobbins continues to dominate these backfield touches, and then Ladd has really been the only wide receiver you can trust. Dobbins, low-end running back 1 in this spot, while Ladd is currently my wide receiver 31 this week. It would be fine using him in the flex. Again, like I said before, his underlying metrics are really strong. It's just a matter of time before he finally has his breakout game. I'd also keep an eye on Kamani Vidal's usage this week. He's their exciting rookie. He made his debut last week, played 19 snaps, 6 opportunities, scores the long touchdown through the air. If his touches, his snaps start trending up, he'll be a very interesting bench stash. You can't play him right now, but just see. see, does he go up to like 25, 30% of the snaps? Does he increase to like 7, 8 opportunities? If that's going to start trending up, he's a very exciting player because we know Dobbins probably not going to stay healthy all season. Then finally, for the Cardinals, Marvin Harrison Jr. is likely going to miss this game with concussion. I'd be shocked if he played. So Michael Wilson becomes a strong flex play. Greg Dortch, low-end flex play. And then Trey McBride is a phenomenal play at tight end. We will then also see what the running back split is going to be this week. I would assume they go back to using James Conner as that lead running back. He fumbled last week. He was banged up last week as well. And so the snaps kind of took a nosedive. I think it was like 28% of the snaps. I would assume they go back to using him as a clear lead running back. But Trey Benson is definitely a capable backup. It'll be interesting to see, when he's going to start to push Conner for touches. I still don't think it's going to happen yet. I think that's more in like a month, 2 months. But for now, James Conner, I think he's like a low-end running back too in a game that you would think they have to lean on him a little bit more, especially with Marvin Harrison Jr. likely out. Lastly, you have Kyler. Definitely a lower ceiling with Marv out, but the mobility keeps him in that low-end quarterback 1, high-end quarterback 2 range. As of right now, he's my quarterback 13. So please leave a like if you watched this far. Please subscribe to the channel if you are new here. I've got 4 free videos every week, so why not subscribe? That way you're more likely to see them. Also, definitely track the rankings changes throughout the week. I do a big update after this video is posted and then tomorrow as well. So especially as news drops, and there's a lot of news this week, that's your best resource for how things are looking come Sunday. Good luck to everyone this weekend. I'll see you all tomorrow with my favorite underdog picks this week. But that'll do it for this one, and thanks for watching.